talking about the biggest stories that matter to you the most. Breaking news, John Calipari is finalizing a 5-year deal to become the Arkansas Razorbacks' next head coach, covering college sports like no one else. The biggest guests in sports. We now welcome in Hall of Famer Jim Calhoun.
Such a pride I had, I came to Connecticut.
The legend, Tim Tebow, joins us.
We'll run it back. I like it.
The legend, Herschel Walker. Welcome in, everybody. Tuesday night edition of the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Torres. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody is having a great day. And we're calling this the post Dan Hurley is staying, and now we get to catch up on everything else edition of the Aaron Torres Pod. So obviously, if you've been following the show, I was away. Then the Dan Hurley stuff broke. We did an immediate reaction pod to the Dan Hurley news. Then we did an immediate reaction pod to Dan Hurley announcing that he is not leaving. And so, of course, today is really about everything else that has happened since producer Matt and I went away about 2 weeks ago. We did not go away together, by the way. Just we're on vacation, whatever. Torres was away. Producer Matt was away. Today, it's about everything else. What I want to do, now that we know that Dan Hurley's not leaving with the NBA draft deadline behind us, do want to get you a post-draft deadline. Post Dan Hurley ain't going anywhere, top 25. Figured it was worth waiting until we got official confirmation Dan Hurley was coming back before we did that. And we'll get into a lot of different things. 2 new teams in there that I'm excited to talk about a little bit of a shakeup in the top 10, a new number 1, by the way. We'll also then take a break and come back and talk about 2 teams that are in there and the impact that players that have committed since we last did a full non-Dan Hurley Aaron Torres pod are going to have at their new schools. Jaxson Robinson is officially a Kentucky Wildcat. I have not talked about it on this show, so I'll give you my thoughts, my opinions, etc. Also, Trevon Brazile rounding out Arkansas in what is probably going to be the final major piece that they add this offseason. Calipari said he was comfortable at 8. They get to 9. What does it mean for them? Finally, we will wrap. Coleman Hawkins. Can we get some sort of clarification on what is going on with him? Maybe a couple other odds and ends. By the way, you see Joey Chestnut is out of the Nathan's hot dog eating contest. What is that about? So we got a lot to get to. I think this is probably the last really big basketball only pod. Obviously, we'll talk a little bit about the upcoming NBA draft and some stuff like that. But I think for the most part, the nitty gritty, nerdy basketball stuff that we've been doing most of April and May, probably going to give way to a little bit of college football. And we are going to we'll just hit on the stuff as it comes. You know, if there's a big Caitlin Clark story, I've had people actually hit me up, Torres, defend Caitlin Clark. This is out of control. So maybe a little bit of that, a little bit of this. And as I mentioned, I think we're to start that off-season grades list of teams that I kind of just feel like, hey, the Kentuckys, the UConns, the Kansases will go ahead and evaluate their off seasons as part of this show as well. So we got ourselves a jam-packed show. Before we get started, just the usual quick reminders. If you're not subscribed on YouTube, please make sure to do so. Also, make sure to put on all those notifications just so that you can, you can support the show. You know when we go live. Also, if you're not subscribed to the pod, Aaron Torres Pod, Apple, Spotify, whatever. And should mention, by the way, if you want to leave a rating and review on Apple or Spotify as well, that would be greatly appreciated. With that said, there is no more time to waste. We're trying to get through June. So let's get to the topic of the day. And the topic of the day, bluntly, listen, I just think, to me, as I said, we were going to do the post NBA draft deadline top 25 just to kind of reset where everything is. And so I figured today would be a good day to do it. We officially know Dan Hurley is coming back. We officially essentially know what every roster is really going to look like. I believe Coleman Hawkins is essentially the only high-profile transfer that has not committed yet. Obviously, we could have a Bob Huggins situation, something weird happen in the summer, a coach get fired, whatever. But I don't think we're going to get that. And if we don't, then rosters are basically set for 2024, 2025, and it's time to start reacting to it. So since we did the last top 25, let's get to it. The number one team in the country. By the way, I'll go through the top 10 a little bit more in depth. We'll rip through 11 through 25, and then we'll take a quick break. Number one, new number one. It's the Alabama Crimson Tide. Listen, I said it about a month ago. This was another one when Torres said it. Oh, it's a hot take. Oh, Torres is always pandering to Alabama or Arkansas or Kentucky. By the way, it's amazing. Just because I have a lot of fans at a lot of different schools doesn't mean I'm pandering. But I said, if Mark Sears and Jaron Stevenson come back, Alabama should be your number one team in the country. And at the time, oh no, what could you possibly mean by that? Well, guess what ends up happening? Alabama gets Mark Sears back at the NBA draft deadline, and virtually everybody put him at number one. So another typical Torres thing where I told you this is how it should be. I ended up being right. Everybody agrees with me, but Alabama's the new number one. Mark Sears was their best player, star in the Final Four. He's back. But more importantly, the roster that Nate Oates has put together is just absurd, okay? This is a team that I call they're basically Noah's Ark. They got two of everything, baby. That's right. They really are great in the backcourt. Aiden Holloway, a former McDonald's All-American, will back up Mark Sears. They have the LeBaron Philon kid who will basically be the backup to the backup. More three-point shooting. I think it's easy to forget. Alabama wasn't always a great three-point shooting team last year, but they had Mark Sears. They bring back Latrell Wrightsell. Now they add Houston Millett, a transfer from Pepperdine. They add also on top of that Chris Youngblood from South Florida, Grant Nelson in the front court, Cliff Omayori, who we obviously talked about when he committed back in May. So the Alabama Crimson Tide are, in my opinion, the number one team in the country. They are heading into next year the number one team. Number two, this is the other one. We've talked about them a ton. The Kansas Jayhawks. And nothing really substantial has changed since the last time we did one of these top 25s. I said it at the time. Bill Self joked that he's been preparing for next year since before this past season ended. Well, he came out storming in the portal. AJ Storr, 17 points per game. He is committed to Kansas. Also, Zeke Mayo, the Summit League Player of the Year from South Dakota State, is headed to Lawrence alongside Rylan Griffin, who is part of Alabama's Final Four team. They're all headed in as transfers. Hunter Dickinson's back. DeJuan Harris is back. There's much more scoring pop to this team, much deeper. You got some veterans. You got some returnees. KJ Adams. They're not going to go 9 or 10 deep, but I think they got 7 really good ones. Only loss in the recent weeks, Riley Kugel, the transfer from Florida. I think he kind of saw the numbers, and I think he was like, I'm going to have the same role at Kansas that I did at Florida. He decides to opt out. Kansas, though, is at number 2. Number 3, the school that has won the last 2 national championships and has a national championship head coach coming back. That is, of course, UConn and Dan Hurley. This has been the big news. Really 2 things. One, they did get Alex Karaban back at the draft deadline, and that's a big deal. Alex Karaban is a star double-digit scorer this year, and I think he would have been drafted. Now, we don't need to do the whole UConn spiel again, but this is also why I didn't think Dan Hurley was leaving over the course of the last couple days. Alex Karaban could have left for the NBA draft and gotten drafted. Decides to return, decides to come back. All those kids that could have entered the portal in April, but believe in Dan Hurley and his developmental kind of processes, I just didn't think he was ready to leave that, especially with a shot at a 3rd straight national championship. So Karaban's back. Hassan Diarra's back. Liam McNeely comes in as a McDonald's All-American. Aiden Mahaney comes in as a McDonald's All-American. The UConn Huskies are the number 3 team, in my opinion, in college basketball. Number 4, keeping on going down the list, the Houston Cougars. By the way, I'm already going slow here. I'll try to pick up the pace a little bit. Houston Cougars in at number 4. Listen, big one that they lose is Jamal Shead, but bluntly, they don't really lose much else outside of Jamal Shead, which is kind of interesting and kind of surprising to me. I think we as great as he was everybody's focused on what else. Well, they bring back LJ Cryer. They bring back Emmanuel Sharp. They bring back a lot of very talented pieces. And so I just bring it up because I look at that team and I say, that is a team that is going to be once again good enough to win the Big 12. Now, I do think Kansas should be considered the favorite, and they're going to be good enough to win a national championship, make a Final Four. Hopefully, they're a little bit healthy late. So I do have Houston at number 4. Number 5, actually another Big 12 team, the Iowa State Hawkeyes. Okay, so Iowa State Cyclones. Oh my goodness, I must have just pissed off the entire state of Iowa right there. But bottom line is with Iowa State. Don't forget, this was the Big 12 tournament champions. This was also a team that made the Sweet 16. And could have beaten Illinois in the Sweet 16, played UConn in the Elite Eight. Don't think it would have mattered because UConn was that good. But listen, they bring back their 2 best scorers in Keyshawn Gilbert and Tamin Lipsey. Couple very nice transfer additions as well. And listen, they have a style. They have a culture. You know, they don't recruit the best players in the portal. They recruit to their system and their culture. Really like what this team's about. Really like the returning talent in Ames. Iowa State's at number 5. Number 6, got to give credit where it's due. I was down on Gonzaga all year. By the end of the year, Mark Few had that team rolling. And here's the thing. Outside of Anton Watson, they pretty much bring back everybody else. Ryan Nembhard, starting point guard, is back. Graham Ike, the starting power forward, is back. Ben Gregg, who I've been a fan of for 2 years since I saw Gonzaga on an aircraft carrier a couple of years ago, is back as well. And I thought, more importantly, they added some nice scoring pop in the portal. Michael Ajayi from Pepperdine and also Caliph Battle from Arkansas. Remember, he was one of the best scorers in college basketball the last month or so of the season. I think it was like something like the last 8-9 games of the season. He scored 20 plus for Arkansas. So he's headed to Gonzaga. He adds the scoring depth. I like Gonzaga at number 6. Number 7, yet another Big 12 team, Baylor. Listen, I haven't always loved the roster construction at Baylor post-national championship a few years ago. I like this group, though. The veteran guard in Jeremy Roach, the 5-star guard in VJ Edgecombe, the big man down low at Norchad O'Meara. And as we talked about last time, I do think this is a little bit of a product of Scott Drew being in demand and being desired by the Kentucky Wildcats as well as the Louisville Cardinals. Scott Drew turned down both of those jobs, and because of it, there was obviously an increased financial support, increased NIL support. Baylor, to me, is good enough to get back to another Final Four. I have them at number 7. Number 8, Carolina, kind of an interesting team. Listen, the big news, obviously, RJ Davis, the ACC Player of the Year. He decided to return for a 5th year, has that COVID year, takes advantage. Cade Tyson, a big-time All-American or a big-time transfer from Belmont, comes in, who I think has a chance to one day play in the NBA. His brother plays for the Clemson Tigers. What's interesting though with UNC, they really went after a lot of big-name centers in the portal. Jonas Adu, Cliff Omoyori, Agana Onyenso, kind of came up short on basically all of them. And so right before we left, they signed the Van Allen Lubin kid from Vanderbilt. I like him, but he's not kind of that traditional 5-man. I think they're okay with Jalen Washington, who played pretty well every time that I watched him. But they have RJ Davis back, Ian Jackson, Drake Paul, 5-star McDonald's All-Americans as well. I got Carolina at number 8. Number 9 right behind them, their rival, the Duke Blue Devils. Listen, Duke, weird offseason, only from the perspective they lose 10 players overall, 7 to the portal, 3 to the draft. But 3 to the draft is always a good thing. And a lot of the portal guys were expected because you got the number 1 recruiting class in America coming in. All starts around Cooper Flagg, all starts around who he is and what he's about. And I thought they did a nice job of kind of finding veteran transfers to play with the young guys. Sion James from Tulane, Mason Gillis from Purdue. So you add those guys with Cooper Flagg, and they do have the 2 returnees, Caleb Foster and Tyrese Proctor at number 9, are the Duke Blue Devils. Finally, we'll round out the top 10, and I'll be quick on 11 through 25. Number 10 is the Arizona Wildcats. And I'm high on Arizona with the caveat that they are going to the Big 12. And sorry, but Oregon State and Cal and Stanford aren't on the schedule anymore. Okay, so the league's is tough. I don't think people realize how good some of their young players are, though. You do bring back Caleb Love at the NBA draft deadline. But at the same time, KJ Lewis and Jaden Bradley are both elite level dudes. Jaden Bradley was the dude who transferred in from Alabama a year ago. I thought he was maybe their best player in that loss to Clemson in the NCAA tournament. KJ Lewis is a rising star. Krivas, the big guy. Thought they had a good portal cycle with Trey Townsend from Oakland, as well as Toby Awaka from Tennessee. And they do add a McDonald's All-American and Carter Bryant. So the Arizona Wildcats are number 10. Really quickly, let's just rip through the rest. Number 11, the Purdue Boilermakers, not much to add. 3 starters back. By the way, the 7-foot recruit that they have, because you know they got a kid that's 7'2" coming in. Daniel Jacobson played some Team USA the last couple weeks and has actually looked really good. So that speaks to the fact I don't think Purdue's going to drop that much. Number 12, the Arkansas Razorbacks. Listen, we're going to come back in a minute and talk Trevon Brazile. But I think you can argue now that you have DJ Wagner alongside Jonas Adu and John L. Davis and all the guys that you have brought in, Adu, Thiero, Big Z, on and on, Arkansas will maybe only have 9 scholarship players, which is what we're going to talk about. I think you could argue they have the best top 9 in all of college basketball. Now, I already know what the comments are saying, and I haven't even looked yet. Oh, Cal will blow it. Cal will lose in March. Cal stink. Whatever. Let's save those conversations for another day. I can only go based on what I see on paper right now. I have Arkansas at number 12. Number 13, the Auburn Tigers. First of all, crazy stat on them. You know that 10 of their 13 scholarship players, I think 11 actually. No, I think it's 10 of 12. 10 of their 12 scholarship players are going to be seniors next year. So Bruce Pearl, he is gearing up for a big 2024-2025. The last edition, Miles Kelly, leading scorer from Georgia Tech. I thought he was actually a pretty big piece. They kind of needed one more scoring piece. They do have Janai Broome back. They do have Chad Baker-Mazar back. Auburn at number 13. A third straight SEC team at number 14, the Kentucky Wildcats. Momentarily, we'll go in depth on the addition of Jaxson Robinson. But let me just say, I've said it, and I'm going to say it in the Jaxson Robinson segment. I don't get people leaving them out of the top 25. I don't get people saying this isn't a top. I think they could. I think they're, you could make an argument there. I think 10 to 15 is right for them. I just don't get it. You look at the pieces, you look at the system they will be playing in. Kentucky Wildcats have a chance to, I don't think they should be considered the favorites in the SEC, but I think they have a chance. They're at number 14. 15 is Marquette. No real news basically the entire offseason. Lose Tyler Kolek, lose Osa Ighodaro, do bring back Cam Jones. Marquette at 15. Tennessee at 16. One thing that stands out to me, Rick Barnes really seems to have gone heavy in the portal on scoring. I think he had fun coaching last year. Dalton Connect was putting the ball in the basket. He didn't have to grind out every game 62 to 61. And this year they focus on Chaz Lanier, who we obviously talked about a lot. The Darling Stone kid from Hofstra. I think it's interesting. Rick Barnes seems to have gone heavy in the portal at scoring. Tennessee at 16, Michigan at 17. No major additions. Credit to Dusty May, though. No major additions since we last spoke is really what I should say. But Vlad Golden, the transfer from Florida Atlantic. Danny Wolf, the transfer from Yale. Really good team. Sam Waters from Alabama. They're at 17. 18, Big Rick Energy. Rick Pitino, St. John's. I don't think there's much to add. Kadari Richmond could be Big East Player of the Year next year at St. John's. He's a little rough around the edges, but I think having Rick Pitino as his head coach, that is a good thing. So we do have St. John's at number 18. Number 19 is one of only 2 new additions since our latest top 25. That is the BYU Cougars. First of all, Torres loves those Cougars. And I'll tell you this, we talked, no pun intended. We talked a little bit about this the other day when they got the Igor Demon kid. I don't think people realize what BYU has done this year. So First-year head coach Kevin Young comes from the NBA, okay? And I think what's interesting, when Mark Pope took over Kentucky, brought back 0 players. When John Calipari took over Arkansas, brought back 1 player. Louisville brings back no players. Off of an NCAA tournament team, BYU kept 4 of their top 7 guys overall, and really 4 out of, one of them graduated. So out of the 6 players that were really high profile that could have left, 4 of them decided to come back. So you have a core that has been there, that gets what that school and that system is about. And by the way, they were in demand. Remember, Richie Saunders visited Mark Pope and Kentucky and turned them down. Some of those other guys had really good opportunities. Dallin Hall, Trevin Nell. But then the big piece of news, of course, is the idea that you have added Igor Demon, the 5-star kid who many believe will be a 2025 lottery pick, 6'8" kid. He's from Russia, whatever. And he's probably the highest rated recruit in BYU history. So you add those guys, Mawat Mag, a nice little transfer over the last couple days. I have BYU at 19, 20, the Indiana Hoosiers. We've talked a ton about them with Mike Woodson. I really like what they did this offseason. Love Miles Rice as a transfer from Washington State, mature point guard that they need. Love Cannon Carlisle, upside through the roof. Love Luke Goody, great three-point shooter. And then they obviously add Umar Ballo down low. I know, Mike Woodson, Indiana, it's another one. Until they do it, we'll see if people give them credit for it. But Mike Woodson, Indiana at number 20. UCLA at 21. Not a ton to add there. They went heavy in the portal. Credit to whatever happened in admissions that allowed them to take a bunch of transfers, but they needed it. Key names to know there: Kobe Johnson from USC, Eric Daly from Oklahoma State. UCLA at 21. 22, the Florida Gators, very much the same. Nothing has really changed in the last couple of weeks, but Elijah Martin, the name to know there, transfer from Florida Atlantic. Elijah Martin and the Florida Gators are 22. 23 is the Illinois Fighting Illini. They're still trying to get Will Riley, the 5-star kid. That might bump them up a spot or two, but I don't know how many, I don't know how much a 5-star reclassified kid really, in my opinion, moves the needle in this era. Now, maybe if it's a Cooper Flag, whatever, but there's just not that many guys that can step in and be huge impact guys. But Kylan Boswell's in from Arizona. A couple other nice transfers. I do have Illinois at 23. UC at 24. USC, the Trojans. Credit Eric Musselman, man. He always finds a way to put together a competitive roster. Big names to know there. Desmond Claude is one of the names that you need to know. 17 points per game at Xavier. On top of that, Buzo Agbo from, oh my goodness, I just saw a little bit of a goofy story on social media, but Buzo Agbo from Boise State is in as well. USC at 24. 25 is yet another new one. I got to give credit where it's due. Louisville Cardinals, in my opinion, are the number 25 team in all of college basketball. I think they're the 3rd best team in the ACC behind only Duke and Carolina. And Pat Kelsey went, what do the kids say? He went ham. He went ham in the portal. But Noah Waterman from BYU is good. Chucky Hepburn, a 3-year start at Wisconsin, is going to be their point guard. Terrence Edwards Jr. can play on or off the ball. Kayshawn Pryor, we've talked about a lot. But that is the 25th ranked team in college basketball. A couple teams that just missed the cut. I have Texas at 26, Xavier 27, Creighton 28, Ole Miss 29, Providence and Memphis round out my top 31 because I figured I'd just add the 31st team because I like them. But that is your updated top 25. Top 10, new number 1 Bama, number 2 Kansas, 3 UConn, 4 Houston, 5 Iowa State, 6 Gonzaga, 7 Baylor, 8 is North Carolina, 9 is Duke, 10 is Arizona. And if you want to see any of that updated top 25, you can see it at AaronTorresOnline.com. All right, that's what I think we're going to do. We'll go ahead, take a quick break. When we come back, by the way, as always, drop your questions in the comments section. Appreciate everybody watching a June college basketball show here at this time. And what we're going to do, we're going to take a quick break and we're going to come back because what I do want to talk about is some news that came out after we left. Now, we've been gone for a while, but when we left, Jaxson Robinson, it was that weird draft deadline night where he was going to announce that he would, but nothing happened. Well, he announced the next day he was a Wildcat. I'll tell you what happened there and what I think it does for Kentucky. And I do want to talk Trevon Brazile, who in my opinion is a big ninth piece for Arkansas, their first team. Also, one question. What the heck is going on with Coleman Hawkins? Take a quick break, come back, discuss that all. Be right back. Before we do, many of you ask me all the time, Torres, what can I do to help support the show? You give me hours and hours and hours of content every single week. What can I do to help you? Well, I'll tell you what, do me a quick favor. Check out the Aaron Torres Media merchandise store for all of your team-specific shirts, hats, and more, all available at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. A lot of you wondering, Torres, what can I get in that merch store? Well, first of all, we got our brand new Hope and Pope Kentucky basketball t-shirts. That's right. Mark Pope has arrived. He is here to save the day. Get your Hope and Pope t-shirts there. Also, Arkansas fans, the Big Pig Invasion is here. You can get your tees there. Basketball School Alabama shirts. More Hurley 2024 UConn shirts for your tailgates at Rentschler Field, your games at the XL Center or Gamble. And oh, by the way, your Mike effing Woodson gear for Indiana. If you love football, we got you covered too. We got more Dion shirts and hats than we even know what to do with. The freeze warning has hit the plains. Auburn fans, grab your freeze warning tees now. And of course, our new era, new rules shirt applies to Nebraska football and its incredible fan base. We have more coming for the fall, plenty in stock right now. So make sure to check out the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. And you can always hit me up with any questions. Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com. All right, everybody. I'm back. Good to be back. Good to be back. So what I do want to do is go ahead and I'll say this. There were a few stories that broke right after I left. Now, to my credit, I guess, would you call it credit? I don't know. But basically, what I decided when I was away, I was like, I ain't doing no work. Now, I came back, Dan Hurley, all that stuff is going down. So we did two Dan Hurley shows. But there are a couple stories that we did not get to at really any point other than maybe a post on social media or something. And I want to get into two of them now because they impact two teams that we have in the top 25, which I just did if you missed it. And that is the commitment of Jaxson Robinson to Kentucky. And, of course, Trevon Brazile to Arkansas. So let's go ahead and start with Jaxson Robinson, okay? So Jaxson Robinson, this is the one. I think I've talked, I think I've talked more about Jaxson Robinson in the last 6 weeks than maybe Jaxson Robinson's own family has, though, okay? 6'5", guard, played at BYU, was the Big 12 sixth man of the year, 14 points per game. Enters the NBA draft. And listen, he goes through the whole process. I don't blame him one bit. Takes his time, goes through the process. And when he came out, it was interesting because, well, really a couple things. Is one, I know that I had said that, I thought BYU thought that it had a chance. But probably over the final 24 hours before the deadline, I think even BYU knew, hey, this kid is going to follow Mark Pope to Kentucky, and he's going to withdraw from the NBA draft. That's also what made the NBA draft deadline so darn interesting, and let me tell you why. It is because, did you see what happened on NBA draft deadline night? Most of you probably have at this point, but Jaxson Robinson, he left us all kind of, in the lurch. Because that draft deadline hits at 11:59 Eastern time. Everybody else announces that night. And Jaxson Robinson just doesn't announce anything. And so it's crazy because I had been told he's coming back. He's going to Kentucky. But when you don't hear any sort of announcement, you're like, man, did something change? Did he get some sort of last minute piece of information and maybe he's staying in the draft? Because if you're staying in the draft, you don't actually have to announce anything. You can just announce that you're withdrawing. And so the fact that he didn't announce anything led a lot of people to just not really be sure what to think. I saw my poor buddy Jack Pilgrim, Sean Smith from the KSR podcast. They were on air till like 3 a.m. just like, how much longer do we vamp hoping we get some sort of announcement? And so I bring it up because it does go official the next day. Ultimately, as I said, I'm not surprised. I heard that as the deadline got closer, he was going to follow Mark Pope. And now Kentucky has the player that they've been waiting for. We can talk about the team pretty much complete. I know they still have one scholarship left, but I mean, if they add anybody at this point, it would probably be like a reclassified high school kid or an end of the bench guy. And so I only bring it up because we can talk about Kentucky now, and we can have the conversation about who they are, what they're going to look like, what this team is going to look like in 2024, 2025. And let me say this. I do not get the disdain and disrespect for this team from most of the national media. Now, look, two things. One, let's make one thing clear. First of all, one thing is I don't criticize other media members. Everybody has opinions. If you're not coming after me, I'm not going to come after you. Everybody has opinions. Nobody has to have the same one. If we all had the same opinion, we'd be idiots. And I get plenty of stuff wrong anyway. It wouldn't be cool if we all had the same opinion, but also I get plenty of stuff wrong. So I don't criticize other media people's opinions. But when I see this team outside of some top 25s and really on the fringes of the top 25, I just don't get it. I don't think they're number one. I don't think they're a national championship contender. But as I said, I have them at number 14 in the country going into next year. And I believe that with the right breaks, with the right whatever, that is a team that can compete for an SEC title. Now, I'm not saying they are going to win the SEC. Alabama is my favorite. They're my number one team in the country. Auburn's going to be good. Arkansas is going to be good. Florida's going to be good. Tennessee is going to be good. Ole Miss is going to be good. On and on and on. But when I look at this roster, sometimes it feels like I'm taking crazy pills because I'm trying to figure out, like, what exactly am I missing with this team? First off, in terms of Jaxson Robinson's importance, I do think it is probably the most important piece they've added this offseason. Now, I don't think he's like an SEC player of the year type talent, but in Mark Pope's system, he's proven at the high major level that you can go ahead and get points and get buckets in that system. 14 points per game, 36% three-point shooting. And I think what's important to note, he did it in the Big 12. So if everybody's like, well, he played in the SEC already and he struggled. Different team, different system, different circumstances. You can score 14 a night in the Big 12. You can score 15 or 16 a night in the SEC. So he's a really good player. He is now coming to a system where he has thrived. And let's just call a spade a spade. As complimentary as I have been of BYU, let's also make no mistake. He's going to be playing with the most talent around him that he ever has. And Mark Pope, a guy who just had a team that spent most of the year in the top 25, earned a 6 seed in the NCAA tournament that probably would have been a 5 seed, but because BYU can't play NCAA tournament games on Sunday, they got bumped down a seed line, whatever. By the way, won at Kansas. Like, that was a good team. This team, in my opinion, is much better. Because you look at the roster, just think about the roster that Mark Pope has put together. We don't have to go through all 12 players, I guess it is now. But you have, in my opinion, a bona fide star-level player in Jaxson Robinson. Now, again, not a first-team All-American, but really good. 14.5 points per game. In the portal, you added 4 players overall that averaged double figures in the Power 5 conferences. Jaxson Robinson, Kirk Risa at West Virginia, Otega Owe at Oklahoma, and also Andrew Carr at Wake Forest. You added probably the best defensive perimeter player in the portal in Lamont Butler and the best defensive rim protector in the portal in Amari Williams. You added probably the best three-point shooter, certainly statistically in the portal, in Kobe Brea. And then your first 2 or 3 guys off the bench are going to be guys that are proven commodities in college basketball. Kirk Risa is probably going to be the backup, in my opinion. That's a guy that led Arizona to a Pac-12 championship, okay? Brandon Garrison is going to be your starting center. Brandon Garrison was McDonald's All-American, And Otega Owe is a guy with plenty of experience in the power conference. And so when I look at this team, listen, they're not perfect. I got them at number 14 overall. I'm not going to sit here and claim that it's the best team that I've ever seen built in the history of college basketball. But when I sit here and look at them and say, like, people got them ranked in the top whatever, not even in the top 25, I just don't see it. Tell me what they don't have. They have a chance to be elite defensively. They have, I believe, probably 4 or 5 guys that can get you double figures on any given night. But here's the crazy part. Look at those pieces in that system. Let's just project out the starting lineup. Lamont Butler, starting point guard, going to get everybody else involved. He was basically a double-figure scorer at San Diego State, which at San Diego State, when he scored 9 a game, that's like scoring 17 a game because nobody puts the ball in the basket at San Diego State. They play super slow. But beyond him, you have probably at the 2-3-4, and they're going to play, small ball, but you have Kobe Brea, a 50% three-point shooter, quite literally 49.8% three-point shooter. You have Jaxson Robinson, the reigning Big 12 sixth man of the year and a 14-point-a-game scorer. And you have Andrew Carr, who averaged 13 a game in the ACC at Wake Forest, shooting 37%, 6'10", who can shoot the crap out of the ball. You also have Amari Williams down low, maybe the best defensive big. And so to me, I look at that lineup. I'm like, that lineup is scary, especially when you marry it with Mark Pope's system. And so I don't mean to go on and on. We don't need to spend too much more time on this because it's June. We got plenty of time to talk about all this, one later in the offseason, but certainly more likely as we get into the season, Champions Classic, all that good stuff. But like this notion that Kentucky is like a, fringe top 30 or 40 team, I don't get it. I love how the pieces fit. And I just sit there and say, if somebody had put together that same exact roster, Big 12, 4 guys who averaged double figures in power conferences, including the Big 12 sixth man of the year. You also have on top of that the best three-point shooter statistically in the portal, the best defensive wing player in the portal, kind of perimeter player in Lamont Butler. You have the best defensive big guy in the portal in Amari Williams. And you also have shooting, scoring, passing everywhere, defense off the bench with Brandon Garrison. I really like this Kentucky team. We'll see, by the way, if they add one more piece. But I do like Kentucky and what the roster that Mark Pope has put together this year. Is worth noting, first of all, by the way, always make sure to drop your questions. But it is worth noting, we'll get to some questions at the end, but it is worth noting that there was also one other major piece of news that went ahead and dropped while I was gone. And I do want to talk about that very quickly as well. Give me 1 sec to send out a tweet here. Go ahead, give me 1 second to send out a tweet. And let's talk about something that I want to talk about. Give me 1/2 second. Drop your questions in. I hope, by the way, everybody was well while I was gone. Drop your questions in. Let's see here. That would be, okay. I remember what I'm talking about now. Okay. All right. So, Jaxson Robinson is a Kentucky Wildcat. But as I said, there is one other, I think, pretty big piece of news that broke while I was away, outside of the Dan Hurley stuff, which we've talked about on 2 separate shows. That piece of news, John Calipari has been adamant. We are only likely, realistically, probably going to recruit and sign, 9 players total. And he said, he's like, I could even go as low as late if we have to. But obviously, I think he wants to get to 9. Why do I bring it up? Well, DJ Wagner pops on Memorial Day weekend. That gives them 8. And then you're wondering who's going to be number 9. Well, we got official confirmation about a week ago as how about this? Trevon Brazile, who was actually like lights out awesome 2 years ago pre-injury, gets hurt, unfortunately, in the 22-23 season, comes back this year, isn't 100%. He had entered the NBA draft. I thought there was a possibility that he just stayed as he was kind of battling injuries. He decides to return, and in somewhat of a shocking twist, he ends up deciding to stay at Arkansas and play for John Calipari. And so I want to get into it because, one, I actually really like the piece. I think this is quite literally a no downside, high upside move. And also, I think there's a very compelling case that Arkansas might have the best top 9 in college basketball. Now, you can argue, do you need more than 9 to have success? That's a different conversation for a different day. But I think you could argue that Arkansas might have the top 9 in all of college basketball. But I'll tell you what, before we get to that, I do have one quick question. Can anything stop the Big Pig invasion? Did you see what Arkansas put on their Twitter shortly after Trevon Brazile's commitment, announcement, signing, everything? Producer Matt, pop up the tweet. From the official Arkansas Razorback account, POV, you catch the start of the Big Pig invasion. So, listen, Arkansas basketball, we're cool. Torres, the Torres brand is strong. By the way, that tweet went up literally within minutes of when Dan Hurley announced officially that he was coming back to UConn. So within like 2 minutes, Dan Hurley's coming back. Arkansas is tweeting Big Pig invasion as if it is their own. And I don't mind it. I don't care. We're cool. I appreciate you, Arkansas. By the way, if you want a Big Pig invasion tee, go to AaronTorresOnline.com. That is where the Big Pig invasion started and where it's going to continue. There's the tee right there. Thank you, producer Matt. Because guess what? I love this pickup for Arkansas. And I think they have a chance to, like I said, I know what Kentucky fans are going to say in the mentions. Oh my God, Cal stinks. I'm just here to tell you that top 9 is as good as anybody's in college basketball. So let's get into Trevon Brazile really quickly and talk big picture here. Because listen, Trevon Brazile is a really good player who, has had kind of just a sad trajectory, okay? Like I said, 2 years ago, that year that Arkansas, many people believe might be the number 1 team in the country, he started out the season and he was arguably their best player. Remember, this was when they had Anthony Black and Nick Smith was kind of in and out of the lineup. But Trevon Brazile averaged 11.5 points per game, 6 rebounds per game. He was shooting the ball at a high clip. This is all at 6'10", okay? And I bring it up because of the fact that he was playing lights out. Now, he got hurt. He came back. He was up and down this year. But to me, this is an all upside, no downside game for John Calipari because at worst, you got another 6'10" body who's super athletic, who's comfortable in the SEC. Listen, he's comfortable at Arkansas too. It's a different, what's the right word? It's a different group and coaching staff and whatever. So that part isn't as important to me, but he's comfortable in the SEC. He's played in this league. And at worst case scenario, you got an athlete to play 10, 12, 15 minutes per game, bang bodies, block shots, maybe hit a 3 every once in a while. But if it clicks, this kid, I still believe has first round NBA draft potential. Now, going into his 4th year, major knee surgery, I don't know if he'll ever get there, and I don't think he will probably be a first-round NBA draft pick. But if you get that kid playing like he was 2 years ago, 12 points per game, 38% three-point shooting at 6'10", that is absolutely insane. Now, to me, what is also interesting about this, and this is kind of the bigger question that I find fascinating, is that John Calipari is trying to do something very interesting and very unique, and that is he might go into next season with 9 scholarship players. Okay, and as a quick backstory, as this portal era has evolved, it's worth noting that coaches have kind of scaled back. You used to fill all 13, you'd redshirt a guy, you'd have a freshman that you knew, 2-3 freshmen you knew weren't going to play, but they were going to be around. And as this portal thing has kind of come about, the kind of operating standard is you don't fill all 13. Most will fill at least 11, maybe 12, so you have an extra practice player or two. But I have never heard of anything under 10, because when you don't have 10 scholarship players, you know what that means? You can't run a full 5-on-5 practice. And I still think there's a possibility that John Calipari brings in, some really raw freshmen, or, some role player maybe from the state of Arkansas that kind of understands that his role is going to be really limited just to fill out the back end of the bench. But as far as the top 9, I think it's as good as anybody in college basketball. Okay, so first of all, DJ Wagner is going to be the point guard. He was officially announced by the school right around the time that I left. Listen, I've done probably 30 maybe not 30, but 7-8 segments on DJ over the course of this spring. I love him. I love his game. I believe he got a bad rap at Kentucky, 9.9 points per game this year, and we've been through it. But he was playing really well early in the season. He was great against North Carolina. North Carolina was a 1 seed. He was great against Florida. Florida was an NCAA tournament team. And it just is really unfortunate for him that he got banged up in the middle of the year. And as he kind of came back, guess what happened? He came back at the same time that Reed Sheppard was ascending, that Rob Dillingham was ascending. And I know John Calipari didn't play them enough, whatever. But he was loyal to DJ. I still believe the best version of Kentucky in 2023 was when DJ was healthy and in those games. It allowed Reed Sheppard to play on and off the ball. It allowed Rob Dillingham to not have to play too much. So DJ Wagner's coming back. He'll be healthy. And then your other 2 guards. Maybe the best transfer in the portal, John L. Davis, All-American, 18 points per game at Florida Atlantic, and Boogie Flandin, McDonald's All-American. Your wings, while admittedly young, Carter Knox and Billy Richmond, both have NBA upside. Carter Knox was a McDonald's All-American. Billy Richmond's a top 20 prospect, 6'6", 6'7", 6'8", play hard, crash the glass, whatever. Those guys are coming back. You also, on top of it, have Adu Thiera, who I think is more of a 4, but they'll probably try to play him at the 3. Emerging college star, 7-5 at Kentucky last year. I thought he was underused. And then you got the 3 up top in Big Z, Jonas Adu, and Trevon Brazile. Big Z, Trevon Brazile have proven they can hit threes. Jonas Adu, another guy that's played in the SEC, has experience, physicality, whatever. And so when I look at this roster, again, I know that no one that I'm aware of has ever actively chosen to go into the season with 9 scholarship players, but this is a really good group of players. And what stands out to me is a couple things. One, I actually sort of like how all the pieces fit. And I think John Calipari, listen, criticize him for whatever. I think he learned his lessons from a season ago. Last offseason, what happened? He had 2 big guys get hurt, Agana Yenso and Aaron Bradshaw. And when he did, his front court was down to nobody. And he went out, he signed Trey Mitchell from West Virginia after the Bob Huggins incident in June. And then he signed Big Z late. And I just bring it up because by the time everything came together, by the time the season ended, he had 11 dudes on his roster that all wanted to play because a couple guys got healthy during the season. A couple guys got healthy later in the season. And what you had was a team that simply had too many guys and not enough spots. So I think Calipari, you can blame him for whatever. But he proved this offseason 2 things. He stuck to his word about focusing on the portal at least for one offseason. He said repeatedly, can't do it the way I was doing it. Can't bring in 5, 6, 7 freshmen every year. You need that balance of the portal kids, and you hope to get 2 or 3 elite freshmen, and you hope to get them playing their best late in March, but you do need to change. So he does that. And then I also think he learned that important lesson of you can't have too many guys. And it is, to me, this is what I would say. I would rather, if I was an Arkansas fan, seeing how things ended for him last year against Oakland, I would rather have him learn from his mistakes and maybe go into the season a guy short and hope everything works out. Okay, listen, by the time you get to March, you only want to be playing 7 or 8 anyway. So you go in, hopefully, he's got the right amount and can get through the season without anything catastrophic. But the counter to that is he also learned what you can't do. So I like Trevon Brazile. As I said, I think it is essentially zero downside. I don't really see, I really actually, to be honest, I actually don't see any real downside to the Trevon Brazile return. And so credit where it is to Coach Cal. Trevon Brazile is a Razorback. One more thing before we get out of here. So listen, let me get a quick swig of water. By the way, drop your questions, all that good stuff. Sorry, I've been talking for 50 minutes straight. What else is new? All right. One last topic I want to get to. And we, as I've said many times, we cover the portal about as aggressively as just about any outlet in America. And that's okay. Everybody's got their strengths, weaknesses, their niche, whatever. We found a nice niche covering the portal. People care. People want to know. And so I bring it up because the portal is done. We've done our top 25, our top 100. Guys have committed. Most guys are on campus at this point. And so I only bring it up because there's one player left who hasn't committed. And I don't think his recruitment is really going the way a lot of people think. And that's Coleman Hawkins, who, of course, is the former Illinois forward who entered the NBA draft, withdrew, and decided to come back to college. Now, what was interesting was Coleman Hawkins said from the beginning, he goes, I'm not going back to Illinois because at the end of the day, I feel like they have recruited a full roster for next year. If I come back, it's not going to be fair to the guys that were brought in to replace me. And so he decided that he's going to be a true free agent. But as the recruitment has heated up since I've been away, it's kind of interesting that there's no real market for him in terms of high-profile schools for a player as good as he is. First of all, he's a very good player. I had him at number 4 on my best players to enter the portal all offseason. 13 points per game, 6'10", can really guard like 2 to 5, can play small ball 5, gets others involved, 38% three-point shooting. By the way, those numbers were through injury. But right now, here is his list of schools. Visited Kansas State the last day or so. Okay, they're okay. They missed the tournament last year, but I think we all think Jerome Tang's a future star in this business. Commit to Kansas State, whatever. The other two that have been reported so far, SMU, Andy Enfield, yes, of course, is there. They have a lot of NIL money, but SMU and LSU, I like Matt McMahon, but it's been 2 pretty rocky years. If he has another one, I don't know if he's going to be around for year 4, especially with some guy named Will Wade a couple miles away winning 30 games a year. So I just bring it up because you sit there and you say, very high-profile player, what is going on with his recruitment? And what I think that I see and that I believe is that Coleman Hawkins, I do believe, made a mistake that I think other players need to learn from going forward. Now, what's that mistake? So he enters the portal and he also, on top of that, declares for the NBA draft. That's not a problem. Okay, whatever. I think he entered the portal in large part because last year he got kind of screwed by the process. Didn't enter the portal last year, comes back to Illinois, and by the time he withdrew from the draft, the portal was closed. So he couldn't transfer, and in the process of not being able to transfer, he kind of had to take whatever NIL offers were available. So this year, and he's been public about this, I don't think I'm speaking anything that a lot of people don't know, but he enters the portal, but when he comes out, here's the thing. He's seeing all the money all these other guys are getting, and he is thinking to himself, well, I'm going to cash in. Great Osabor publicly got $2 million. We've heard crazy numbers for Umar Ballo in the one. I think the Umar Ballo was like 1.3 to 1.5 somewhere in there. Whoever you can speculate on, John L. Davis, on this, that, the other thing, whatever. So what he saw was a lot of money being thrown around. And what I believe he thought was, well, I'm Coleman Hawkins. I'm freaking awesome. I'm going to come back and I'm going to get paid. I'm going to go to a great situation. The problem is there just isn't a lot of money left. And there is certainly not a lot of money left at the spots that people actually want to go. And so I find it interesting because this is a very high profile player who might not be playing in a very high-profile place next year. And to me, he left the portal, and I even remember saying it at the time. I said, I hope he has a landing spot, because you look at these rosters. Let's just go through the rosters that we know have a lot of NIL. Arkansas had basically one spot left. They chose Trevon Brazile because Trevon Brazile was ready to commit on the spot. Coleman Hawkins wanted to play the field, see how much money you could get, blah, 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 this and that. Louisville was full. He was still supposed to visit Louisville. That got canceled. My guess is his dad tweeted at me, oh, it has nothing to do with what you think it has to do. No, I think they're out of roster spots, and they're probably out of mostly NIL money as well. North Carolina, we thought they needed a big guy, but does he really fit? He's kind of more of a 4 than a 5. He's not really the back to the basket guy. And so now North Carolina's out of the picture. They take the kid from Vanderbilt. So you go on and on down the list, and what ends up happening is there's not a lot of money at the places you want to go. I mean, and by the way, it's not just those schools. Kentucky's out of roster spots. UConn's out of roster spots. Kansas has spent all. There's just, it is an important lesson for these young players. If you're going to withdraw from the NBA draft, you need to make one of two decisions. One, you need to withdraw earlier, or you need to withdraw earlier so there's more options, there's more on the table. By the time June 1 comes around, everybody's rosters are set. And again, all of the NIL money has been spent. But then two, and this is the important part, if you're going to withdraw from the NBA draft, you have to know the market. And this is where his agent, I think, really failed him. Now, listen, maybe he gets some Godfather offer. Maybe Kansas State is the school that he always wanted to go to anyway after Illinois. I don't know. I'm guessing not. But this is a failure by his agent. This is a failure to not know the market. This is a failure not to know the market, not only from a financial standpoint, but who actually even needs players at this point. And as I said, nobody really needs players at this point. Rosters are set. Guys are in. Guys are coming back, whatever. And it's his agent's job to be working behind the scenes. It's his agent's job to know who has availability, who would be interested, and how much money do they have. And so the kid comes back, and I think he's in a tough spot right now. Again, maybe Kansas State is the spot that he always wanted to go to. I don't really think so, because he stayed at Illinois for 4 years. But maybe Kansas State is always the spot that he wanted to go to. But SMU, again, I love that staff at SMU. They were in LA forever. I know them all. They're great people. But Coleman Hawkins, I don't believe, wanted to end his career at SMU. I certainly don't think he wants to end it on a bad LSU team in the bottom of the SEC, probably at a PMAC that's going to have 4,000 people in it every single night. So this is an important lesson, and this is an epic failure by his agent. Honestly, I think it's a fireable offense. You're the NIL guy. You have to know the market, who's available, what's out there. And oh, by the way, you also have to know if this kid thinks he's getting great O support money, and that's not even let me say it's pretty sourced. I know a school that was recruiting him that basically he's like the conversation, the agent said the conversation starts at grade O support. Now that's negotiating whatever. I don't really care, but you got to know the market. Who has what money to spend, and is there a landing spot for me? Now it's June 11th, and he's still trying to figure things out. Feel bad for the kid, but this is an important lesson. Agents work for you. Make sure they're doing their job. Producer Matt, do we have any questions, or is the chat just devolved? By the way, Producer Matt, you do a great job, because I was trying to do my own questions the other day. It was a disaster. It was also a lot of fighting, man. There was a lot of anger in that. So love from Purdue. This is my guy in Purdue. Okay. So he says, love from Peru. A-Train, the big A, best in the business. Go Cats and UConn for AT. Congrats on Dan Hurley. Hey, can I just, people saying I'm getting too cocky with this Dan Hurley stuff. One thing I will say, I do believe Dan Hurley at some point is going to be in the NBA. But you also have to admit, I kind of freaking nailed this one. The second the story came out, I said, this is a big nothing burger. And he ain't taking that job. Don't sell me on first of all, he doesn't want to live in LA. Wife doesn't want to live in LA. And he doesn't want to be, why would you give up going for 3 straight national championships at UConn to go coach LeBron, who just had a coach who made the Western Conference Finals a year ago, fired? I'm not saying that if this wasn't 2014, coaching LeBron isn't a better opportunity than UConn. But LeBron in this year, you think Dan Hurley wants to draft Bronny and develop him? You know how I knew this wasn't going to happen? I told you, I read that first Woj report, and there's a big excerpt in there about, just the opportunity to develop Bronny. It's like, we're doing this. We're still doing the Bronny stuff. What are we even talking about? So thank you to Clint, who, of course, is in Peru, our number one listener in Peru. Clint, you are the man. I appreciate your support. Jim Jinx, you're the man, Torres. I'll tell you this, Matt. I don't know if they like you or if I was just being too cocky with UConn. We did not get a lot of the "you're the man, Torres" comments the last few days. It was a lot of your anger, this and that. John Hand, producer Matt, is Kentucky overrated? I mean, is he asking you? Do you want to chime in? We haven't put you on camera yet, producer Matt. I was kind of keeping you a secret there, but I don't think they're overrated. I think they're properly rated. Now, Matt's also an Auburn fan, so I think Matt thinks everybody's overrated, especially the Crimson Tide. I mean, the Crimson Tide aren't even in producer Matt's preseason top 25, which is kind of crazy. But yeah, no, I think I think somewhere like the 12 to 15, 16 range feels right for them. I don't think they're the best team in the SEC. I think they're probably going to finish in that 2, 3, 4 range. I do think, though, once you get past Bama, everybody's got questions. We know about Calipari's history. Now he's in a new place. Tennessee, it all clicked with Dalton Connect, but they really do lose a lot. I mean, they lose Josiah Jordan-James, Santiago Vescovi, Jonas Adu. So there's questions there. Auburn will figure out. So I don't think they're overrated. I think they're kind of right on track. John Hand, 100% Torres. You're speaking facts. Man, everybody's so nice today. This is great. Okay. Out of the top 10, if you had to pick one, which do you think is most likely to fail to meet expectations? So that one is actually easy. And I think, one fan base is obviously going to be upset. I think it's Arizona. And the only reason that I think it's Arizona, I think Tommy Lloyd is a great coach. I love what he's done. I love the roster that he's put together. I think a lot of people are a little bit more down, but I love Jaden Bradley. I love KJ Lewis. The problem is what's interesting about them. They've always had a front-loaded out-of-conference schedule. Played at Duke last year, played Purdue on a neutral. They played in Maui a few years ago. This year, I think they play in Atlantis. They've always been good in conference, but they've at times kind of just had off nights in league play. They lost to Stanford 2 years in a row in league play. This past year, they lost to Oregon State on the road. They got swept by Washington State. Now, I understand they're talking about I think that, in my opinion, it's Arizona because they have struggled in the conference portion of things. And then I think the obvious thing at that point is also that they're moving to the Big 12. And so now you replace Stanford and Cal with Houston and Baylor. You replace USC and UCLA, who even as good programs, they're not what Kansas has been the last couple of years, not what Houston, not what Iowa State's going to be next year. So I think it's Arizona. I actually considered dropping them, but I think based on the talent and the roster they have, I have to keep them there. So yeah, I think that's about it. Tell you what, let's do something a little offbeat to wrap the show. Because there was a story that I saw that I was like, we got to squeeze this in. By the way, and I've said this a few times, today's probably the last real heavy college hoops day. Probably do a little NBA draft stuff. I'll be honest, I don't think most people care about the NBA draft. I think Kentucky fans are just going to be mad about Reed Sheppard and Rob Dillingham. 2 of the top 3 or 4 are probably going to be international. I think UConn's kind of an interesting situation with Donovan Clingan and Steph Castle, but I don't know that there's a lot of meat on the NBA draft bone this year. Probably talk NBA draft certainly the day after, but you get the point. So we're going to go probably in a lot of different directions. Think it's going to be grab bag. We'll try to have fun. We'll try not to go too crazy on the Caitlin Clark stuff. But we did have a pseudo Caitlin Clark moment, because what was the big topic the final few days I was gone? Caitlin Clark being left off the Olympic team. Did you see Joey Chestnut is getting left out of the hot dog eating contest this year? And so this is kind of a wild story. Joey Chestnut will not participate in the hot dog eating contest simply because, by the way, we do not have a Torres on hot dogs account or anything like that for you guys to follow. I apologize. But Joey Chestnut is out of the hot dog eating contest because apparently he's been cheating on Nathan's with another hot dog brand. Apparently, I've read part of the story, but I got kind of bored, to be perfectly honest. But he participated in some other hot dog eating event with another brand. Now, where it gets a little bit tricky is that the brand is vegan hot dogs. So or vegan dogs. So they're not technically the same hot dogs. But let me just say this. On the one hand, I understand you have to have principles as a company and an organization and whatever. On the other hand, Nathan's is out of their god darn mind keeping Joey Chestnut out of this event. What are you doing? He's the only reason anybody watches. I can't name a second hot dog eating contest person. Isn't there a Black Widow, maybe? I don't know. So the point being, you watch it for Joey Chestnut, just like none of us are going to watch the women's Olympic team without Caitlin Clark. I'm sorry. I've had 10 years to get into Asia Wilson. I'm not getting into her. I'm sorry. I've had 10 years to get into John Smith, the second greatest hot dog eating contestant that's ever been runner-up to Joey Chestnut. I haven't gotten in it. Now, I will say, there is one card left to play. One, you just let him back in. Two, remember Kobayashi? Kobayashi, weird deal. Won it every year. He kind of invented the dipping the water into the hot dogs thing. And I bring it up because, Joey Chestnut came in and started beating him. And then Kobayashi kind of had a falling out with Nathan's himself. So this is the year. It's almost like the Coleman Hawkins situation. You grab that bag that you were going to pay to Joey Chestnut. You pay it to Kobayashi to get him to come out of retirement or whatever he's doing. It's actually kind of a sad documentary about him on ESPN, about how he basically got blackballed from the hot dog world. Also, I think there was like some pretty heavy, undertones about his background that I think really Nathan's kind of played up to make him kind of the villain, and he's not from here and he didn't understand why. The only reason is I think it's time to make amends with Kobayashi. But I think the real answer is just let Joey Chestnut in. It's a freaking hot dog eating contest. It's a hot dog eating contest. And oh, by the way, here's the other thing. No one's going to watch. It's 4th of July. I ain't watching without Joey. Well, I don't watch anyway because it's gross. But I certainly won't watch without Joey Chestnut. But I'll tell you what. When it is June 11th and there's no NBA Finals games, Joey Chestnut is the biggest story in sports. And that sure is something. All right, I'll tell you what. I think it is time for us to get out of here. If you are not subscribed to the Aaron Torres Pod and Aaron Torres Pod YouTube, by the way, great crowd for a Tuesday night at this point. Not a lot going on. We appreciate your support. You guys are always encouraged. Aaron Torres podcast questions at gmail.com. If you want to send in some questions for the show, maybe we'll do another mailbag show. I was thinking this, and I said this the other day. I do think what we will probably do is that what I will think we will do, we'll do a couple. First of all, we might do a college baseball World Series preview show at some point this week. I know it starts Friday. But I bring it up because what we might do is, a few years ago, I did kind of these off-season grades things for college hoops. And what I'm thinking is, as we get into these slow months, maybe a couple more interviews, a couple more guests, but then also what I do think we're going to go ahead and do is probably bring back the off-season grade. So we'll do a full segment on whatever the big topic is of that day, and then maybe evaluate UConn and Kansas, or Kentucky and Louisville, or Indiana and UConn, or whatever, just to kind of give you guys some bonus content for the YouTube channel and the podcast. And I'll tell you what, we're going to start ramping up college football. magazine season is here. I've kind of started behind the scenes, kind of getting all my information together. It's that time. Like I said, magazine season is here. You start to kind of familiarize yourself with college football. So we'll go ahead and do that in the coming months as well. But I'll tell you what, great crowd tonight. Appreciate everybody who joined us. If you're not subscribed to the Aaron Torres pod, please make sure to do so. Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Music, wherever you listen to podcasts, make sure to subscribe. Also subscribe to the YouTube channel. Go ahead and put on our notifications. We genuinely appreciate the number of you that continue to watch this show here into June. But put on those notifications and we'll keep rocking and rolling. We'll do a third show this week. Maybe it might be a college baseball preview show if I can wrangle Phil Elson, the great broadcaster from the University of Arkansas. He's my go-to college baseball guy. I know Arkansas is not in the College World Series, but he knows Kentucky. He knows Tennessee. He knows all these SEC schools. So Phil Elson could join us later in the week. But it's time for me to get out of here. Appreciate everybody's support. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you're following on social media. Shout out to Torrent Craig. Shout out to Rachel, who hates my voice. Shout out to JJ Redick, UF head. Congrats, you unofficial Lakers coach. We'll be back soon.